Hello everybody, it's Rebecca here. Thanks for joining me for yet another Sims 4 speed build. And in today's video, we are continuing the spooky season build series. I've done 2 videos so far to celebrate Halloween month, and this will be the 3rd out of 4 videos that I've got planned. This is going to be a build for a haunted house residential, and I don't know what I'm going to title this video yet, so this is a Victorian style paranormal haunted house using the haunted house residential lot type, which came with the paranormal stuff pack. It is an awesome pack. I use items from that pack all the time, and I've never actually played a haunted house residential before, but I am going to be using a lot of items from this pack, and we're also going to be using a lot of items from Life and Death as well. And yeah, this was just a really fun, eclectic hodgepodge build. I initially was going to go for something that was a little bit cleaner on the outside. You can see the outside right now. I've got the siding from the werewolves pack, which is a little bit worn down. I tried playing with swatches for quite a while. I didn't keep any of the footage, but I was going through some of the cleaner siding that we've got, like from base game and Growing Together, and the colors just weren't what I was looking for. I really do feel like the base game colors that we've got for siding are just so desaturated, and I wanted something a bit more saturated initially. But then when I used this swatch from the Werewolves pack, I decided to go for maybe a slightly more beat up exterior. You know, there's been some damage done to the exterior over the years, but the inside is actually quite nice and really rich and full of color and personality. But looking from the outside, you would think that this was like a very dilapidated home. I think it looks creepier on the outside than it is on the inside. And I imagine that the ghosts who live here aren't necessarily the most evil ghosts of all time. They're maybe a little bit friendlier, maybe just more mischievous than anything else. But I did not look at any reference images for this build, so the architecture is completely made up. I'm using elements that I believe are Victorian, and then, I don't know, some version of like American something rather, but because this is like a very hodgepodge build, I imagine that this was renovated throughout the years and maybe some elements were added over time, and maybe at some point there were adjustments made to the outside to make things a little bit more uniform. But for example, I imagine that the attic, which is up here on screen, that maybe came a little bit later than the original house. And I did shake up some of the siding on the outside, so we've got some parts that have the werewolf siding, and then I am using both the floors and the siding that came with the spooky stuff pack. I absolutely love that pack. I mentioned it in my last build that the wallpaper and floors are some of my favorite for doing more dilapidated or abandoned houses, so using that heavily throughout this home. But it looks like it's very patchwork on the outside, so like I said, I imagine that there has been some damage done, maybe from the elements or from storms, and that they've over time just been adding boards to seal things up. But the inside will be very cozy and nicely put together, so it's just a, appearances can be deceiving kind of build, but I am happy with the juxtaposition. I think it's really fun and cool to have like a mix when the outside is beat up and the inside is really put together. And then the windows and doors are mainly going to be from Strangerville, which is also a fantastic pack, and of course, obviously, very heavily features Victorian elements for that world. So I did want to go for more colorful windows. The swatches are really fantastic. You might have noticed in the beginning of the build, I was using like the orange and green color swatch. But like I said, I decided to tone it down a little bit, but we add plenty of color back in on the inside. Now you can see here that I've got wallpaper on in the living room that is from the Bistro kit. I do get rid of that, but I wanted to make a note of it because I thought it looked so beautiful with the brown swatch of the Strangerville windows. And I was using the navy blue swatch from the Bistro kit, the wallpaper that came with that kit. It looks so nice that I'm definitely going to use that in another build. But I found near the end of the build that it was maybe just a little bit too like upscale, and I wanted the wallpapers to be a little bit more old-fashioned. So I replaced those with wallpapers from the Discover University pack. And then the majority of the walls, the turquoise boards with the brown wallpaper, that's from Base Game. And those are wallpapers that I don't use very often, but I do love the colors that they come in when they're appropriate. I do wish that there was a little bit more variation, again, in those swatches because they are very desaturated and they're very pale and pastel. And I do wish that we had richer colors in some of those more ornate Base Game wallpapers that we've got. I know that they added extra swatches to some of the plain modern wallpapers a while ago, but I think it would be really nice to see that for some of the more ornate wallpapers, just so that they are a little bit more versatile, because they really just fit within one very specific type of build. And I imagine that if these wallpapers, the ones with the turquoise boarding, if those had, recolors with like black or maybe more saturated, richer colors, that I certainly would be using them more often, but maybe a lot of other players would as well. But enough rambling about swatches and Base Game wallpapers. Let me talk a little bit more about what's going to be in the house. So you've seen bits and pieces of the kitchen and the dining room and a little bit of the living room so far. There are a couple of different like living areas. So there is a full kitchen, a separate dining room. There's also like a breakfast room that is, I think I originally tried to make that the seance room, and then I moved that into a separate office. So that office is our first of 2 seance rooms. There's going to be another one that is hidden up in the attic. And there are also 2 powder rooms on the first floor as well. And the backyard is very small and simple, but there is some very nice patio furniture back there, as well as a charging table for the Crystal Creations pack, which we used a little bit of that in this build as well. As you know, if I'm going to be doing anything occult, I am going to be adding plants and things from the Crystal Creations pack. I think they go together really well. On the second floor, we have 6 total bedrooms. There are only 5 beds in the furnished version of this home. I left one bedroom completely blank, but there is room for more. And then there are 2 full bathrooms. None of them are en suites, so everyone can access them. I figured since this was an older build, there wouldn't have been like an official en suite to like a primary suite, for example. And that this hasn't been renovated in any modern style over the years. So they kept the bathrooms accessible from the hallway. And then on the 3rd floor, there is the secret seance room, which is accessible through a ladder as well as through a secret bookcase door. And then there's also like a little reading room or a study. And then there's a couple of different storage rooms that I just made blank, and you can do whatever you want with those. And then the landing on the 3rd floor is also a second study area. So there are a lot of things in this house. There is also a basement, which we will see a little bit later on in the video. There's nothing down there. There's a candle, and then there's one piece of decoration, which we'll see later on in the video. But that can definitely be expanded so that there is already access to the basement. So if for some reason you need more room in this already quite large home, then you can definitely expand the basement without any issues there. I also enjoyed pulling a lot of items out of the nursery kit, fairy tale, storybook, whatever it's called, the gothic one. I also hardly ever build for infants or toddlers because they're just, I don't think about them. I hardly ever play with them in my gameplay. So the two kids' bedrooms, one is for a toddler and the other is for an infant, although I think I did mix some of the items for each one. Like I put the potty in the infant's room. You know what? It's fine. It's totally fine. Gameplay wise, I don't think that makes that big of a difference. I think it just shows that I wasn't really super thinking about which items go with which life stage. But yeah, there, like I said, a lot of room in this home, so you can max out the number of Sims that live here. And I was also wondering, as I was taking screenshots for this build, while I was doing that, I didn't actually have the home switched over to Haunted House Residential yet, so none of the like haunted elements are happening in any of the screenshots that you see at the end of the video. But I was wondering if people had done gameplay with the Haunted House Residential with infants or toddlers, because I might be wrong about this, but I feel like the paranormal pack came out before there were toddlers in the game. Maybe? I could be wrong about that, but I don't remember seeing any gameplay with toddlers and the Haunted House Residential, so that might be something fun to do, something to try. And every time I make these builds, I'm like, oh, I really want to do this gameplay idea, or it makes me want to like open the game and actually play, which is true. That's how I feel in the moment. But then I end up opening the game and I just end up building anyway. Once a builder, always a builder. I guess I'm just a little bit addicted to that. So, but yeah, maybe that's something you can try out and then you can let me know how that goes. We've got just a little bit of landscaping here. Not a ton of room in the front or the back, but I am just mixing some plants together. I've also been building this in autumn. So I'm playing from, I placed the household in and then I went into build in buy mode from there so that we could get the seasonal effects even in build mode. So that's why you're seeing the money disappear from the lower left-hand corner of the screen. And it's just so nice to see the autumnal trees in here, but I'm just mixing some green and yellow foliage just to kind of give that extra autumn feeling. And then using the ground vines, the prickly whatever vines from the vampire pack, and I just placed those all over the lot. They are a really great way of making the home feel overgrown. And I, of course, have also used the wall vines from that pack all over the side of this home as well. And here you can see the little back area, which I think is quite cute. And for someone who hasn't had a yard since, you know, I lived at home in high school, it's been a really long time since I've had yard space. This, for me, is probably the ideal size for a backyard. Like just a tiny little patio area. You can do a little bit of gardening if you want to and get some shade from the trees, and no lawn to mow at all. Like it's just like dirt mostly. And that's kind of, I think, the perfect backyard. But yeah, I really like this little back area. And I also enjoyed mixing like the different colors of foliage. So like I said, I was going for slightly yellow plants, but I also had some really like bright green plants. So I would use both the low-lying palm from base game, but I also mixed that with like the yellow grass from the horse ranch pack. And I just think those colors look really, really lovely together. So yeah, really happy with the landscaping. It might be minor, but I think it turned out really well. I also placed some of the vines from vampires on the roof, which is the new feature that we got with the base game update that came out when the fairies pack came out. So that's also very nice to be able to place those plants on the rooftop. Again, it just adds to the overgrown feeling, which I really appreciate. And no one is surprised. I am loading plants into this home. I tried to hold back a little bit so that it wouldn't look too similar to my other like fantastical builds. But yeah, they're there. Definitely using plants from the Blooming Rooms kit. I can't live without those hanging plants. I think they're so lovely. And here is the secret door to the secret seance room in the attic. That is from the Bella Goth kit, which I can never remember the name of. Secret Sanctuary, perhaps. So yeah, I just used that door to create a secret entrance. And then there will also be an entry to that seance room through the ladders that run from the first floor to the third floor. Here I am switching the wallpaper in the living room. I really did like how it looked. Again, it was just a little bit too fancy and I wanted it to look a little bit older and less modernized. I did keep the tiles from the bistro kit in front of the fireplace though. I thought those looked really beautiful, like a little statement piece by the fireplace. So you might have spotted those as well. And then I'm adding just a little bit of like torn, tattered wall decals to the attic. I didn't really add that around the rest of the home because, like I said, I think the inside would have been maintained pretty well. But this seance room, I think there's just a lot of stuff that happens in there. A lot of supernatural happenings are occurring up there, so wall damage is probably par for the course when, the table is levitating and all kinds of stuff is happening up there. So yeah. And you might notice that I've got quite a few different colors happening around the place as well. I really enjoy just like blasting the saturation and color for these types of build. I really like doing that for my Halloween party house build, which I did last week. And I just kept that going for this one. It just adds to the supernatural vibes, and also the ghosts in The Sims 4 come in different colors depending on, I believe, their moods. And I might be remembering this incorrectly, but I think in The Sims 3, the way that they died affected the color of the ghost. Since the ghosts are so colorful in The Sims 4, I think the colorful lighting in this home also really matches it pretty well. I also placed a couple of tables from City Living. There's like these Moroccan style tables, which I thought also really fit the style of the home. There's a little bit of like Moroccan boho happening, not too much. I actually think I could have gone heavier with that. But yeah, there's a couple of elements of that in here. And in general, I feel like after I finished this build, I was like, I kind of wish I'd cluttered it more. I know that people can be of all different camps, whether they want things to be cluttered or not cluttered. For gameplay and for your computer not exploding, it's really nice to not over-clutter your builds. But I imagine that this home, in real life, in the real world when there's ghosts and seances and paranormal investigators, that this home would be like a very cluttered home. Like it's a multi-generational family home. There's been a lot of items collected throughout the generations. That's what I imagine. You can imagine the clutter or you can add it yourself, but I have found myself just using less and less clutter as I find myself wanting to not overload my game. And although I didn't build this for my save file that I'm working on, I might place it in there. I haven't decided yet. But thinking about the save file that I'm making, I also don't want to place lots that have like too much going on. But I'm sure you can still get the feeling that I was going for. Like I said, with multiple generations having lived here, and I imagine in real time there are multiple generations, like there's 3 double beds, so you could possibly have like 2 sets of grandparents, or you can have like the main parents of the household and maybe like a sibling and their partner, or who knows. And then, like I said, there's 2 bedrooms for kids. So yeah, you could have a lot of people living here and quite interesting generational legacy gameplay going on here. We've got a little bit of furnishing on screen right now for the attic seance room. I love this room. Also, the curtains from the Oasis kit fit so perfectly on the flip side of the secret bookcase door. And so I've got those there. That's the only item from that kit that I use. So if you don't have that kit, you don't need it, but they look really nice on the bookcase door. So I really like that. And I love like the rich red colors that are happening in there. I do also have Gshade. I'm sure I've mentioned that in some of my videos before, but if you're new here, I do use Gshade while I'm building. I have always linked my shader in the description, so if you check any of my videos, whichever shader I'm using, I've got that linked. I almost always use Pearl. That's my favorite Gshade shader. And the screenshots you're gonna see are White Willow. And my goodness, does this home look beautiful with shader on. I did, when I was playtesting this, turn them off and was playing without any shaders. And the lighting still looked really cool, but just keep in mind that it will look a little bit different on your computer if you don't have Gshade or Reshade or anything like that installed. But that's it for the build. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video, please subscribe. And I'd really just like to hear what you think about it. I've got one more video coming out next week to finalize spooky season. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.